ask Christians, is Jesus alive? They say, yes, he rose again. He's still alive. So if you go to a crossroads and there are three men there, and you're thinking, well, which way do I go? And two men are laying dead at the side of the crossroads, but one man is standing up alive. Who do you ask for directions? Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. He's the crossroads of our life. And for Farzad 2 years ago, on his birthday, he wasn't just born, he was born again. Amen. I love that. My favorite quote from the Great Awakening in the 1700s, England saw a remarkable period of 100,000 people coming into God's kingdom. And they were known as it was called the Great Awakening because so many people were being born again. And then some of the preachers left England, went by ship, took ages to get to America. They went up and down the east coast of America. My favorite quote is of a man called Nathan Cole. And he starts his quote. I will need my glasses for this. So he starts his quote. February the 15th, 1711, I was born again. I was born February the 15th, 1711. I was born again October 1741. And then Nathan Cole tells the story of how he was farming. And he's in his field, but he's been hoping. He's heard about this man, George Whitefield, who's telling people how they can know Jesus. And he just wishes, he's heard he's in New York, he's in Philadelphia, which isn't too far from where he lives in Connecticut. And he's just thinking, I wish George Whitefield would come close and I could hear him preach. And anyway, he's in his field. At 8 or 9 in the morning, they didn't have watches back in the 1700s, or not the common farmer. And he hears this word, George Whitefield is coming to preach in Middletown at 11 o'clock. And he knows he's got a couple of hours to get all the way by horse. So he runs to his wife, runs to his horse. The two of them start moving as quickly as they can go to Middletown. And he says, and they're galloping, but the horse can't stand it. 2 people is too much for his horse. So he jumps off the horse and just says to his wife, keep going as fast as you can. I'll run and just stop when I say I need to get back on the horse. So he'd run to try to save the horse from dying, I suppose. He'd run alongside till he's out of breath. Then he'd say to his wife, stop. He'd get back on the horse. They'd both ride together. And it went like that for well over an hour. Then he said all he could see was this huge black cloud. And as he got closer to Middletown, he realized the black cloud was dust. Everyone, he said, was straining for their life, trying to get to this sermon. Now, that doesn't happen in England anymore, but it happened back in the 1700s, so nearly 300 years ago. So he said he manages to slip his horse in between all the other horses. They were all sort of head to tail. And he gets to Middletown just as George Whitefield's getting up on the platform to preach. He said, I saw this young, slim Englishman, and he looked like an angel. And then he brought a word of authority from God. My old foundation was broken up. I was born again that day. It's a much longer account. It's a beautiful account of how the Spirit of God comes down on an individual, but actually on a whole region. The whole region was straining to get to this particular preach. Now, Farzad's story sounds just like that. He was born on this day, and then on his birthday, 2 years ago, he's born again. And it's a lovely account of how God changes us. I love Afiat. Bless you. Afiat in Farsi. I love the illustration of the change that comes on an individual before they're born again and then after they're born again. I lived in Florida for 10 years pretty much, and one of my homes was with three other men, young men, and we were all students in a mobile home in Ocala, Florida. The only trouble with this mobile home had two problems, really. One was we had mice would get in because they cut the pipes quite big for mobile homes. So mice would come up, and we took it in turns to empty the mouse trap, which is a long story. Doesn't matter. The worst thing, however, was if in the middle of the night, the lights were off, and we'll walk bare feet everywhere in Florida. It's very hot. So we're walking in the mobile home, and you'd walk into the kitchen to open the fridge, and you'd go, and you'd realize you've just trodden on a big cockroach. But if you turn the light on, the cockroaches will run. You can't believe, big cockroaches, they disappear under thin little skirting boards, under fridges, under the sink. They just disappear the minute the light goes on. They hate the light. That's a great illustration of us. Before we know Jesus, I didn't know I hated the light. I didn't know I wasn't living for God. I thought I was living okay. But actually, every time the light went on, I scurried for the darkness. Now, Jesus says this: light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear their deeds will be exposed. There's something in our nature that's a little bit like a cockroach. We love the darkness. We like to stay in the darkness. We don't want everyone knowing just what we're doing in the darkness. But God sees everything we're doing. Jesus says, you should not be surprised when I say you must be born again. So I suppose the big question really is, have you been born again? Have you had a nature change? Now, I don't think, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. Or a cat in my throat, as the French say, for some reason. I guess they don't like being called frogs. So it's something like that. There's something in us. I think if you grow up in a Christian home, sometimes you don't know. You just kind of glide into Christianity. I don't think my children could say, this was the day I left being committed to darkness and now I'm committed to light. We actually always prayed, never let our children know a day without Jesus. And we don't think they ever did. So they can't say, well, I was lost, I was a drug dealer, and now I've been born again. So they haven't got that kind of story. I think that's a better story. My story is I was committed to darkness. Didn't realize I was, but I was. I was born again, and then suddenly everything changes. You see, when Jesus gets a hold of you and breathes life into you and says, come follow me, it's a life-giving call. And that life-giving call changes your nature. You now love the light. Have you ever seen moths? They will keep going for the light. You'll see if we had little bowls under these lights, there'd be moths in there because they would kill themselves going for the light. Moths will go towards a flame and catch fire. You think, oh my word, that's awful, but our God's a consuming fire. And he says to us, we can actually come towards him protected as we come to this consuming fire who is our God. So Jesus says, do not be surprised when I say You must be born again. You can't love God. You can't love Jesus. You can't live for him unless he puts a new nature in you and turns you. None of us are cockroaches, by the way. We're made in the very image of God. We're made in God's image. Why are we made in God's image? To worship the Maker. We're the only ones who can really do it. We're the only ones who can sing and praise in the way that we've been doing today. That's why you were made. But it may be you're still living in darkness. You need to say, Jesus, change me. Help me to love you. There's something amazing happens. And in verse 21, Jesus says this, whoever lives by the truth comes into the light. And it may be seen plainly that what has been done in the sight of God. God can change your nature. Take out your old sin-loving nature, darkness-loving nature, and put in a new nature that says, I love God. I want to live for him. You must be born again. You need a complete change of nature. For me, the most wonderful thing that causes me to cry every time I think about it is coming from a non-Christian home, a lovely non-Christian home, but nonetheless a home committed to what the Bible would call darkness. None of my family, me included, were living for Jesus and didn't care. Apart from at christening time when you got the baby christened, then you promised to raise the child as a Christian, but you didn't care. My sister actually rang us and said, look, we're going to get our children christened. Please don't come. We'd feel so embarrassed promising in front of you that we're going to raise our children for Jesus. You don't mind if you don't come, do you? And my sister loves me, but she didn't want me there while she was going to lie to the vicar and the God she doesn't believe in. So a year ago, my mum was dying and died. But in the process became a Christian. And she said, my sister went in every day to visit my mum. And I said to my sister, Tina, did mum say anything about her spiritual state? And my mum had said to me that she'd become a Christian. But I wondered if she'd said anything to my sister. They're so close. They lived very close their whole lives. And my sister said, oh, I'm not religious like you, Graham. Her accent's not quite the same as mine. And I think I'm not religious. I love Jesus. So anyway, she says, I'm not religious like you, Graham. But she did say, I think I've seen the light. And I'm like, on the other end of the phone, yes, thank you, Jesus, that my mum was trying in a little way to say to my sister, something's happened to me. Now, when God takes out your old nature, he's the surgeon, and puts in this Jesus-loving nature, let me say this, you do not have to pray. You do not have to get up at 3 a.m. in the morning. You do not have to read your Bible. You do not have to go to church. You do not have to give. You do not have to forgive others. However, when he puts this new nature in you, you want to pray. You find yourself praying. You want to read the Bible. You find, wow, I love this. Wow, is that what it says? And there's things in the Bible that just jump out at you. You want to be around Christians. There's something about them that just encourages you and strengthens you. You want to give. You want to forgive others. You find yourself just being very, very forgiving. So I love the fact that an old friend heard that Farzad was in trouble, and he must have prayed. And he must have said, God, open a door for the gospel. But all he did, first of all, was listen and love Farzad and listen to him and encourage him. Didn't even tell him he was a Christian. I think there's wisdom in that. But then there came a time after about 6 months when he said, I've got good news for you, Farzad. I am a believer in Jesus. He's forgiven all my sins. So please, in your life, Christians, make sure you have non-Christians in your life. And watch out for them. Pray for them. Ask God to open a door for the gospel for them. And then be ready. You don't have to wait till their life disintegrates. But just keep being kind. And sometimes you'll think, wow, a door seems to be opening for me to say something. Make room for friends in your life who are not Christians. Who's missed an important meeting in their life? It's not about me, Charlotte. This is about you. I've been an elder for over 30 years in Horsham, in Manchester, in several churches, and then in Liverpool. I've never missed an elders meeting. Last Sunday night, we were watching Blue Lights at 8:30, and good series if you haven't seen it. And I've got a G&T. And then I have my phone there, but I don't really like looking at my phone all the time. So I look at my phone at 8:30, and at 8:30, I just see this text from Andy McCall saying, "Where are you? Or are you coming? Are you coming?" And I'm like, coming to what? We had the crazy Sunday the week before. Anyway, there was an elders meeting, and it was started at 7:30, and I couldn't drive. I'd had a gin and tonic. I wasn't drunk, but I wouldn't want to drive. And we were enjoying blue lights. So I missed this important meeting. Thomas, one of Jesus' 12 apostles, missed an important meeting. We're not told what he was doing, but Jesus has risen from the dead. He's appeared to his disciples. Judas isn't there. He's killed himself. He's committed suicide. He's not one of Jesus' true believers. But the others are all there except for Thomas. And then when they see Thomas, I'm sure they were like, "You missed an important meeting." Jesus is alive. He breathed on us. He commissioned us to go and tell good news to all nations. And Thomas says, he doesn't apologize. I quickly went, "Oh, I'm so sorry. So sorry." I didn't say I was drinking gin and tonic. So sorry, not coming. Hope it goes really well. Praying for you. Lots of love. Great. Something like that it went. So Thomas goes, "I will not believe he's risen unless I can put my hand in the hole in his hand and the hole in his side. Only then will I believe." Now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." He said, "Unless I see the nail marks where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." So a week later, his disciples were in the house again. Thomas this time has turned up. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." That's our God. These are a group of men who pretty much had left Jesus when he went to the cross. John was there, but everyone else had left him. Peter had denied that he even knew him. When you know Jesus and have a relationship with him, there's no more condemnation. He doesn't say, "You should have been there at the cross. You should have been there with me. That was the hardest time in my life." He just says, "Peace be with you." When you know Jesus, you have peace with God forever. That's why we're so thankful for his body broken, his blood shed. So Jesus says to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas says, "My Lord and my God." I believe he worshipped Jesus right then, right there. Jesus is not just a man. He's God who came down, which we remember every Christmas. He's the God-man who died for our sin, the perfect man who never sinned, saying, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Jesus is the one who can give you a relationship with God and have eternal life forever. Now, I love the Gospel of John. We're doing the Gospel of Johanna, it's called in Farsi. So at the end, John tells us why he's written. He was a fisherman. His life changed when he met Jesus. And he says this, these are written, I've written this account, that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. That's the deal. You don't have to clean yourself up. You come to him who is clean, and you say, I'm filthy. I'm like a cockroach. I love the darkness. Change me. I need you. I need you to change my very life. He's inviting you today. Give your life to him if you don't know him already. We're going to get the band back. Then we're going to baptize Farzad. Esfandia is going to come forward. So let's stand. We're going to